Welcome everyone, Bruchim Aba'im. So much to share, so much to say. I'm just getting over a cold. Can you hear a little bit? Still there a little bit? Okay, it's on its way out, Baruch Hashem. I'm not contagious. Okay, so a lot to talk about, a lot going on in the news, a lot happening in the parasha. And as you know, my habit and obsession is finding current events that are happening in the world, happening in the parasha. And I don't think there is a clear one that I've seen in the past year, I think, that is clear identified in the parasha as to what's happening in the world. And it's a little exciting if you ask me. A little controversial if you ask somebody else. But we'll get there. First we've got to build up a little bit. So the parasha, of course, is all about Yitzchak, Isaac, and basically the mantle is passing from Avram Avinu to Yitzchak, to his son, and then from Yitzchak to his kids, Yaakov and Esau. So the obvious name of the parasha should be, Toldot, which it is, which means we always told generations, but it really means descendants. Because when it comes down to it, we're only living for our kids. Right? That's what we're doing. Everything we're doing in life, everything your parents did for you, and God willing you'll be doing for your kids, everything you're doing in your entire life from birth is preparing yourself in order to hand over the mantle of leadership to the next generation, whether that's through your own children, God willing, B'ezrat Hashem, your students, your friends. There's always, but nowadays, everyone's teaching. I'm saying everyone's got their own website at this point. I'm saying everyone's got their own, Twitter account. So everyone is always giving over to other people as well. So that's really what we're all about. Jokes aside, it's true. We're all about handing over. We don't think about ourselves. We think about the future, what's going to come. And this is a classic example of it. So there's a very interesting difference, however, which the rabbis make a big deal out of the difference between Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov. They make a double stress to point out that they were not alike. Although they came from one family, they had very similar missions and desires in life, and they all wanted the same thing, to bring divine consciousness into this world. That's what they were all about. And yet the methodologies of doing it were completely different. And what's interesting and very important to our generation is that it doesn't seem like each generation minded. Everyone wants their kids to be like them. Everyone wants their kids to marry someone who is like them or follows the same path. And yet we see over here that the difference between Avraham to Yitzchak and Yaakov were completely different. Let's just run through that because it's very, very interesting. And really it comes in the form of a triangle if you were to really map it out. So we start with Avram Avinu. Avraham was all about spreading love, spreading chesed, bringing people under the kanfei hashchina, under God's protective wing. And he did that by doing chesed, welcoming people into his home, together with Sarah, his wife, and feeding them and giving them the best accommodation, and had a special inn, a special hotel, Eshel Avraham, whether it was a tree or a hotel or a motel, we're not sure. And he would bring them in and he would convince them there was a God, and they would thank God. And he created thousands and thousands and thousands of followers, actually over history, millions, if not billions of followers. It was all about doing good for others. He spread the love, and that's why we say to live in a tent, because he had to travel around in order to share this information. And then we jump to Yitzchak, his son. And you would have thought Yitzchak would have been like, he would have doubled down. Oh, he had 50 tents. I'm going to have 1,000 tents. He infected these many people with goodness and chesed and doing righteous actions. I'm going to double that, triple that. No. Yitzchak is the exact opposite. You couldn't get more different. He followed in the path of his father, but he did it in a completely different way. Avraham was there to bring it from on top into the world, and Yitzchak is a very polarized and solitary figure. You don't even hear too much about him in the Torah, especially after the Akedah, and it just seems like he's working on himself. That's how it seems. It's all about me, and I got to work on myself in order to make myself into a better person. If other people are influenced by that, are impacted, that's okay. Now you would have thought I would be like, what? All the chesed I taught you in the tent, you saw we were doing. Doesn't mind. Everyone has to find their own way to achieve their own maximum spiritual potential. And some people are the rah-rah people, and some people are the more quiet, private people, and that's okay. Unfortunately, this is something which has been lost in many yeshivot. They try to, unfortunately, although it's changing now, when I was growing up for sure, everyone had to fit into one mold and fit one way, and this is the way Judaism is, and it's going to be this way for everyone. It's like this way or the highway. And that's just not the way it is. That's, by the way, the proof for this is in the Amidah. How do we start the Amidah? Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, and Elokei Yaakov. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. What should it say? Elokei Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. That's what it should have said. But it names each of the Avot, and it says Elokei, the God of. Why would it say the God of 3 times? We know it's one God. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. That could be potentially be misunderstood, thinking, God forbid, there's more than one God, which there isn't. And the reason is because each had their own personal relationship to Hashem. So there's the God of Avraham that we relate to in the Avraham way, and there's the God of Yitzchak, and his relationship to Hashem was completely different. And then there's Yaakov. And Yaakov's way was completely different as well. So if you want, it's like this. This is the way one of my great teachers used to put it 30 years ago in yeshiva. He said, Avraham is the thesis. He's the idea man. He brought the idea of monotheism into the world and spread it. Yitzchak is the antithesis. He worked a different way, which is antithetical to what his father set up, and his father didn't mind. So what is Yaakov Avinu? He is the synthesis. He pulls it all together. So Avraham is Mr. Chesed. Yitzchak is Mr. Gevura, strength, because it's all about inner strength. And we'll see a very interesting story in the parasha that really fits in exactly into this idea. And Yaakov is a synthesis of both. He's got a little bit of his grandfather. He's got a little bit of his father. Because if it's all chesed, then it's all too good and everything's fantastic, which life isn't. And if it's all Yitzchak, it's all Gevura, then it's just too much. I can't handle it. So Yaakov had to come along and synthesize his father and his grandfather's ways, and that's why Yaakov, by the way, became the future of the Jewish people. It didn't start with Avraham, it didn't finish with him, it didn't start with Yitzchak. It kind of had to get to Yaakov in order for him to have both. The proof for this idea is actually in the first pasuk of the parasha, because it says, "Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham." These are the generations of Yitzchak, because Yitzchak and Rivka are about to have twins. Right? And it says, Ben Avraham. It calls Yitzchak the son of Avraham. Avraham, Holeded Yitzchak. Avraham had a son called Yitzchak. So all the rabbis jump on this it's like a mirror verse. It says, these are the generation of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. Avraham had a son called Yitzchak. So everyone has their own understandings of why the pasuk goes. Yitzchak, Avraham, Avraham, Yitzchak. Just say, Avraham had a son called Yitzchak. They weren't alike. It doesn't do that. So we could probably give an entire shiur on 200 answers to this one pasuk. But based on what we said so far, it's actually very interesting. It's a little Kabbalistic as well, but it fits in very, very much in what we're talking about. It says, Yitzchak. Yitzchak is Mr. Gevura, strength. So you'll never see in the Torah the name Yitzchak mentioned twice. Yitzchak. That's too much. I can't handle that. I can't take too much Yitzchak. Yitzchak is Ketz Chai. Ketz Chai. Ketz is the end in life. He's death in life. He's a living contradiction. He's someone who kills himself. Yitzchak is Ketz Chai. But then it says Avraham. So Avraham is mentioned twice. Yaakov is also mentioned twice, but not Yitzchak, as far as I know. So it says Yitzchak, then Avram, because we can have a lot of chesed in this world. A double chesed we can handle. And then you have Holeded Yitzchak. So you have Yitzchak, that's strong. He's Mr. Strength. Ketz Chai, death in life. Then you have 2 Avrahams to kind of smooth it out. Don't forget your nice, sweet father was. And then Yitzchak again, because we've got to talk about him now. So that's how you do it. This can be seen. Can you see how that works? So it's like strength, soft strength. 2 Avrahams together, great. 2 Yaakovs, great. 2 Yitzchaks, can't handle it. We see this in the Shema. In the first pasuk of the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. You'll notice that Hashem's name is mentioned how many times? 3 times. Hashem is Yud with a Hey and a Vav and Hey. That's God's name of mercy, of Rachamim, right? That's God's name of miracles, of doing nice stuff. Then there's God's name of Gvura, strength, of Din, of judgment, which is Elokeinu. And then it goes to Yud with a Hey and a Vav and a Hey again. Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem, Echad. So once again, you've got to sandwich the Gvura, the strength, the challenging part between two nice, soft versions of Hashem. Because if it was just Elokeinu, Elokeinu, you don't want that. All right? You want to keep them separate, and that's why it's even sandwiched in over there, say the rabbis. That's pretty much how it all formulates. So, although they're different, and each one has its own quality, and it has its own worth, at the same time, you've got to know when to emphasize one, and you still need strength, and you still need gevura, and sometimes you've got to go to war, and sometimes you've got to go to war preemptively, and sometimes you've got to kill people. It's just the way it is. But you can't make yourself into that person alone. There's always got to be a little bit of Avraham still inside you. It's got to be a little bit of Yaakov still inside you. It can't be all Yitzchak. If it's all Ketzah, there's other nations out there who go to war for God and they just want to kill and kill and kill, and we are being the victims of this to this very day, literally to this day. It's too much. Way, way, way too much. The idea of killing yourself for God and here, but that's Mesirat Nefesh, right? That's doing an extra mitzvah. That means giving more tzedakah than you normally give, although it's, challenging sometimes. That means saying the right thing when you want to, curse someone out. That's an inner strength, right, that needs to be unearthed, literally unearthed, as we are going to see. Okay, fine. So that's Abraham, that's Yitzchak. Let's get to Yaakov, and let's figure out why he was born with a twin brother. So Yaakov had a twin brother called Esau. What does the word Esau even mean, by the way? Esau. What does that mean? Made. Right, ready-made. Asui. That's what the rabbis say. He's Mr. Ready-made. Why? So the rabbis say because he came out of the womb, he was ready-made. It's got to be more than that. It can't just mean he came out, with like a cigar, a top hat, and a long coat. It's got to be more than that. So what it was, my dear friends, was that he came out made with a mission in mind. Was that mission good or was that mission bad? Can a person be born with a bad mission? Like, to not be a good person. Is that possible? Is it possible God would make someone with a bad mission? When I say bad mission, I mean like, not something which is like awkward or uncomfortable, but like evil. So we believe not. We don't believe so. We believe that people are born with attributes, but those attributes can always, if that person wanted, lean towards goodness. It could be nature. It could be nurture that led them into this, become a psychopathic killer. Maybe they were born with it, but there was some potential for them to channel that for the good. So we don't believe that a person is born evil. They're born with potential which could be used for the good or for the evil. Let's use that idea, whether you buy into it or not, with Yaakov and Esau. Esau is born. Now we know Esau is going to become one of the biggest problems for the Jewish people in history. Him and his descendants, as we're going to see, keep causing us the most trouble. We see from him Amalek, we see from him the Greeks and the Romans, and there's millions and millions of people, right? Among them, millions and millions of Jews have been slaughtered by this person. So whatever he did, right, the seed that he brought into this world seemingly was really, really bad. But that's plan B, because we already said, you're not born bad. So what actually was plan A? And many times in life, my dear friends, even stories in the Torah, things start with plan A, and they quickly progress into plan B, right? We know that Adam and Eve went to stay in the garden, not get kicked out. The Jewish people, right, were meant to go straight to Eretz Yisrael, but they sinned with the golden calf, had to wait another 40 years. So there's always a plan B, sometimes a plan C, D, or E, I don't know, waiting in the wings. This is one of those stories. Esau was born as a twin to Yaakov. They were together. They had a mission that they were meant to do together. Esau was actually given the ability to do something amazing. And what was that? That was to create a physical world that was able to hold a kli, a vessel, goodness inside it. Create a world that is built up with amazing technology, as it was back then and is today, with amazing buildings and ideas and the idea of overpowering the earth. What was Yaakov meant to be? Yaakov, the father of the Jewish people, was meant to represent the spiritual, right? The more fluffy stuff, connecting to the spiritual realm. That doesn't mean that Yaakov was completely void of any of Esau. There's some genetic materials, like a yin-yang kind of thing going on. There's a little bit of each inside each one of them. And that doesn't mean that Esau was exclusively meant to become a warrior, creating a physical world that was fit and ready to receive God's goodness. It wasn't just that, but it was primarily that. And that's how it started. And the rabbis go out of the way to tell us that actually for the first 13 years of their lives, Yaakov and Esau were getting on really, really well. They had an amazing relationship. And if you saw them hanging out and you saw them playing together and doing what they want to do, it was all going swimmingly. And then for some reason, and it's a very difficult discussion to figure out what happened. Because according to this idea, it wasn't nature. Because he was born ready-made to do his positive but difficult, challenging mission. That's what Esau was meant to do. And yet, very quickly, well, actually not quickly, it took 13 years when they hit bar mitzvah, whatever bar mitzvah was back then. I don't know if they had a big party or something, got called up to the Torah. There was no Torah. I don't know what happened. Celebrate the bar mitzvah, right? There weren't any parties and hanging out and getting singers, and that didn't exist. But there's something about that age that represents maturity, which is why a boy comes to mitzvah at 13 and the girls at 12. At that point, you started to see his character go off. And then he kind of opted out. I don't want to go into this right now, but some of the blame is laid at the feet of Yitzchak and Rivka. I wouldn't say this. I'm just telling you what the rabbis say, right? They do say that some of the blame does actually go to them. One of the great rabbis, Rabbi Samter Raphael Hirsch, talks about this and says that the way Yitzchak dealt with him, he was very, very strong. Tremendous gevura. That's who Yitzchak is, remember? And there's no Yaakov yet. So somehow that was maybe too much, swing towards that direction, and so Esau picked up on that and moved aside. What's interesting is that what was the one mitzvah that Esau was really, really good at, that was so good that even his twin brother Yaakov later in life was nervous that he wouldn't be spiritually successful against Esau because of this one mitzvah? What was it? Kibbud Avim, right? He knew how to honor his father. So there's some very strong relationship. The way I picture it is probably not accurate. Just in my brain, I see it like, the army sergeant's kid, you know what I'm saying? Where everything is, and some kids take that, and some kids just take that and can't relate to it. It's just too much for them. And yet they still love their father because they know he means the best. They know the father means the best. They just don't know how to relate to them in order to imbue in them what they actually need. I'm not saying it, but there are great rabbis that say that. Some of the blame does lay at their feet. It was just too much, which makes sense because you need a Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu, however, was able to, but it seems like Yaakov Avinu was more nurtured by his mother, right? He was more nurtured by Rivka, and he was able to tap into that. And Yitzchak was more of an influence on Esau. And Esau really, really, really did. By the way, there's a reason, probably the best reason that Esau did not kill Yaakov Avinu was because it would have upset his father. Imagine that. That was the one thing that held him back from wanting to, not punch Yaakov's lights out because he knew it would upset his father. And probably as Yaakov was concerned, that was, Dayenu, right? Good enough, at least we have that to stop him following in order to kill me. So these two sons now grow up separately and they become their own nations. It's not just losing out on his mission and leaving the family and marrying out of the family. Yitzchak Avinu also did not want to become a part of not only this world, but also the next world. You see, Esau, not Yitzchak. Esau did not want to become part of this world and did not become part of the next world. If you remember, Esau was willing to sell his birthright, right? His free 10-day trip to Israel. He was willing to give up his. But what is this birthright? What does that even mean? So I always thought it was like a thing saying you're the firstborn and you get. No, it doesn't mean that. What it actually means is that he was going to inherit the spiritual world as well in Olam Haba. He was going to get a great portion here and get a great portion in Olam Haba. He realized that his actions in this world were for naught. They weren't actually, but that's what he felt, and what you feel is what you become. He really felt as though everything I'm doing is for nothing. I've given up on the family. I'm off the derech. I'm OTD. OTD. I'm off the derech, and they just throw it all away. But you see it today as well. Many people, they'll do one small infraction. They think, it must be my parents hate me, and Hashem hates me, and they throw everything out. It's a great shame. Everyone makes mistakes. That's pure Yetzer Hara. And Esau represents the Yetzer Hara, the epitome of the Yetzer Hara. Right? Just because a person sins in one area and they do it twice, 3 times, maybe 5 times, right? Maybe even 7, 8 times. This doesn't mean you've been cut off. This is the generation we're in. We're all tested, and it meant to get back in. Unfortunately, you see many, many people, in many communities, unfortunately, who they feel as though they do one small infraction. By the way, in the scheme of things, it is a small infraction, and they throw everything away. Literally everything. It's a great shame. Right? Unfortunately, there are many, many in the very religious world where if you just do one thing wrong, you might as well just eat pig. You know what I'm saying? You might as well just completely leave the fold. Take off your belt when you're praying. You don't wear a hat, you're gone. And many people say it started that way with that small little thing, and they're like, well, if I did that, I might as well do everything else. This is a big, big challenge. So Esau actually fed into this. He felt, if I'm doing that, I'm nothing. So he sold his Olam Haba to Yaakov Avinu, his birthright. He basically said, there is no Olam Haba. He didn't believe in it, because your beliefs end up following your actions, right? Which is another discussion, but that's the way it kind of manifests itself. And so he completely leaves and gets out the picture. Okay? And that's why, at the end of the parasha, Yaakov, who did actually buy it in a very legitimate way, comes along and takes all the brachot in this world and the next world. The seeds of Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba are really found over here in this Yaakov-Esau battle. Okay, I want to leave that aside because everyone talks about that. I want to talk about something really weird, and we'll finish with this. And it goes like this. There's this whole story inside the parasha where you see Yaakov come along and Yitzchak come along and start to dig wells. He digs wells. Now, when I was a kid, I was like, okay, he's well digging, right? He likes to go out and wants to dig wells because everything that happens in the world is always wells, and there's always water going on. Something's going on over here. I don't know what it is, but that's what I need to know. Why do I care about wells being dug? Not only that, we're told that the wells that Yitzchak dug were wells that his father, Avraham Avinu, had dug and then got covered over. They got filled up. Comes along Yitzchak and he redigs these 3 wells. Let's just discuss this because the names of the wells are going to reveal something to us. So basically there were shepherds. He's living in a place called Gerar. Gerar is, so Yitzchak after the Akedah was not allowed to leave Israel. This area, some say, could well be on the outskirts of Israel. So they say, but we said he's not allowed to leave Israel. After the Akedah, Yitzchak became so kadosh, so holy as a korban, he wasn't allowed to leave Israel. But they're like, you know what? He didn't really leave Israel because it's close enough to be impacted well by Israel. And some say, truthfully, it wasn't Israel then, but it will be in the future when Mashiach comes. So he was able to somehow tap in to some future area that is presently being cleared out for us to come and take control over. I'll leave that hanging, and you can think about that in your own time. So these shepherds of Gerar come forward, and they start to argue with Yitzchak's shepherds, right? And the flocks. So what do? They fill up this well. Comes along Yitzchak, and he digs out this well, and he calls it Esek, contention. So he digs a well, and he gives it a name. Why'd you have to name a well? And why would you call it contention? I mean, on the face of it, it's because they had a fight right before they dug it out. Okay. So he dug another well, and they quarreled over that one too. And then he redug that well to bring out the water, and that well was called sitna, which is harassment, because he's being harassed by these other people who are refilling wells. Isn't that a strange story? Like, why are we talking about wells? There's another one. And then he moved on, and he went and he did another well, and they filled it, and he opened it up, and that one was called Rehovot, which is still a city in Israel. I don't know if Esek is still a city, or Sitna, I hope it isn't, but Rehovot is. And that's called, what's Rehovot? Wide open spaces. And that third well, there was no contention over, it was open, it was left open, and he didn't have to deal with any more digging. What is going on? So I'll give you two layers of answer. One relates to what we said at the beginning of the class, and one is we're going to talk about into the future, which could be happening now, which is a little controversial, but we'll get there. So the first one is that Yitzchak, we said, was all about finding inner strength, okay? And inner strength is always represented by working inside yourself. So Avraham, if you will, is all about chesed and love. So he's showering water and love and Torah, because en mayim ela Torah, mayim and water and Torah are always connected. They flow, they give us life, they go to the lowest point, because the person who is the humblest person receives it. And so water is always going to represent wisdom. Wisdom. Oh, and a side point, shidduchim, by the way. Right? All the avot meet their partners by the well. As well as of information, because you've got to get to know each other, right? By the water fountain at work. And so the well comes in, and what's he doing? So Avram is Mr. Bring it out there, throwing it for everyone to see, let's learn Torah, and he's all about digging wells. So Avraham, say the rabbis, represents divine consciousness flowing down, and Yitzchak is working hard, because Yitzchak, Ketzchai, death and life, those are the two words inside his name, and he's digging in order to bring the water up. And they say you need both. It's not just enough to have the water, divine consciousness thrown upon you. You have to work at your own spirituality as well. You can't just be in the audience, listen, and then get on with your life and do whatever you want. There has to be a certain amount of personal growth in your spirituality as well. That's represented by well. So that's Yitzchak. Yitzchak is all about working on himself. As a side point, this is also represented by the 3 daily services. We know that Avram Avinu represents Shacharit, because he prayed in the morning. Vayeshkam Avram Baboker. So Avram is Mr. Morning, right? He's bringing light to the world, right? That's what the morning does. Yitzchak is Mr. Afternoon. That's why he invented the idea of afternoon prayer, mincha. Right, he went out in the afternoon, suach basadeh, to pray to God in the afternoon. What's happening in the afternoon? It's the hottest, the most difficult. You're working hard, and you've got to stop and pray a little bit. So that's very, very difficult. So Yitzchak represents the hard work of Olam Hazeh. Yaakov, we're not going to get to too much today, is all about nighttime. He represented Arvit, because he prayed at night. He met God at nighttime. And he's going to represent the idea of challenges at nighttime and darkness, but praying when things are dark. Okay, so the 3 avot are going to represent 3 times a day, which represent 3 different experiences that we go through, and how we have to channel all of them at some point, right? Ourselves and in history. So that's Yitzchak's afternoon, right? He's Mr. Let's dig the well, let's get in there. Not of just sit there and get free food, right? Like Avram Avinu, we're going to have to work in order to get ourselves up and out the well. You got it? Okay, fantastic. So that's one understanding. The deeper understanding, actually, is that Yitzchak, and why Yitzchak is an interesting question, was given a little glimpse. And it's unusual, because Yitzchak, I'm not sure why he was given this glimpse. Maybe we can figure out together. Usually Yaakov was the one who's given this very clear, not even glimpse, vision of the future, but it was given to Yitzchak, because these 3 wells represent wells of learning and Torah, which is represented by the 3 temples in Jerusalem. And if you remember, the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed by the Babylonians. So Yitzchak was kind of working hard in order to unearth and get that out, but it was closed off after all that work was closed off, because the first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, right? He destroyed the first temple. The second temple, so that's the first one, and that is the first Beit HaMikdash that Yitzchak is seeing in that first well. Yeah. The second one is going to be, so that was called Esek, right? Because there was contention with the Babylonians. The second one is called Sitna Hatred, because there was baseless hatred among us. And the other nations came, Rome came, right? Titus came and destroyed the second Beit HaMikdash. So that's gone, and that's closed off. But the third one is open spaces. And there is no argument over that one. So Yitzchak was given a vision of the future Beit HaMikdash that would stand forever. Okay? That's what he sees. So at the end of days, we're going to see this third and final temple, which Yitzchak was privy to see at this time, represented by these three wells. The last one is Rehovot. It's not to say that the third temple is going to be built on a place called Rehovot, because it's not. It's going to be Yerushalayim, right? But that had not been set up officially yet. He's going to see it. So why is it Yitzchak? So I don't know the answer why he got, because usually it's Yaakov. Yaakov is Mr. Naita, Mr. Galut. But I do know one thing, and this is what the Balaturim says, and we'll leave it with this final piece. And he says like this. He says, you'll notice last week's parsha talks about Yishmael, the father of the Arab nations. And it describes how he's going to fall upon all his brothers, which is basically a way of saying he's going to have influence over a major part of the world. Okay? That's what you're going to see. Al kol penei achav nafal. Right? Yishmael and his descendants are going to fall upon much of the world. Okay? But it does use the word nafal. Nafal means fall. The next pasuk, the Balaturim, says, Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak. These are the generations of Yitzchak. Whenever two verses or two themes or two ideas in one verse appear next to each other, even though it seems they're completely unrelated, there must be some connection. It's called samuch. When things are samuch, when they're put next to each other, it's two stories in the Torah put next to each other. Sometimes Rashi or others will say like, those two stories happen at different times, in different ways, different people, but they're connected thematically. Same thing over here. When you see Yishmael go down at the end of days, that's when the generations of Yitzchak, that's us the Jewish people, are going to go up. Because between the Bnei Yishmael and the Bnei Yitzchak and Yaakov, there's a certain seesaw effect. When they're up, we're down. And when we're up, they're down. There's a certain way that things follow this way. At the end of days, they're going to come attack us. They're going to hurt us tremendously. But they're going to go down. The bad among them are going to go down. Hopefully there'll be good within Yishmael who are going to want to reinforce us. Ve'ele told Yitzchak, then Yitzchak comes up. And that's when we're going to get to build the third and final Beit HaMikdash. That's the pattern, and that's why it was shown too well. We didn't see particularly why, but that's how Yitzchak seems to be folded inside, because he was the one who had to deal with Ishmael. He's Mr. I'm going to fight Ishmael. Yaakov has to fight Esau, which is a whole different battle, but the Ishmael fight, which Yitzchak did, is a very, very different one. I will say that in the end, we do know that Yishmael did help in burying his father, Avraham Avinu, and Rashi says because he did teshuvah at the end of his life. And so too, it'd be hard to accept this right now of what we're seeing, but at the end of days, we're going to see that the Bnei Yishmael are also going to teshuvah, and hopefully that's going to be the catalyst for them to give up their claim in Olam Hazeh to Har HaBayit and give it to us so that we can build the third temple. I've never in all my 52 years on earth heard more chatter about the building of the Beit HaMikdash. Maybe in history there was, but I've never heard more chatter about building the third and final temple than we've been hearing in recent weeks. So I think something is cooking and something is stirring up. I'm not suggesting that someone should build a third and final temple now, because as I said, it will start World War III, IV, V, and VI simultaneously, but it's good that it's in our conversation and in our consciousness. We'll stop over there. Thanks, guys. Any questions on anything we said? Yeah. Yeah. So it could be in one pasuk. You'll see sometimes two ideas in one pasuk come together. And sometimes you'll see two stories in the Torah, right? Like what happens to the Meraglim and Sotah. You'll see certain things they see happening. Those can be put together again, like stories, so it can appear in different ways. It could be two pasukim next to each other. There's different ways that it appears. And Rashi will many times point out the different forms that it comes in.
So like the story of and then
They connected over there. That's the case of some. That's absolutely right. Two different stories, and that the rabbis will find a linkage between them, a thematic connection. Yeah?
Why were there some rabbis called Rabbi Yishmael?
There is a Rabbi Yishmael. First of all, Yishmael is a beautiful name.
Okay.
Absolutely beautiful name. Yishmael. What's better than that?
He's not part of...
Rabbi Yishmael, we say him in the Siddur. Yishmael Omer.
He's not part of the Yisrael. Yishmael.
No, but the name is. It's a beautiful name.
So then why don't we do it anymore?
I don't know the answer to that question. I will say that once the descendants of Ishmael started to become a problem towards us, maybe that's when they started to avoid it. There were many people. There's a school in my neighborhood called Ashar, and the A stands for Adolf. I believe so. That was a Jewish name. There were Jewish people with that name. I know it sounds crazy to you. How come you don't see anyone called that anymore? We had a little certain incident with a Mr. Adolf, and things have not been good ever since then. Okay? So it may have gone out of style once the Bnei Ishmael started attacking us, because for a long time we actually did okay with them. Right? You never see Esau among the Jewish people. Right? Actually, have you heard the expression, they say you should have Yiddish Nachas, they say, Yiddish Nachas? Ashkenazim say this. Because there's two people in the Torah. There's a bad Nachat and there's a good Nachat. They say you want the Jewish one. It's like a joke thing, but it's based upon a true idea. Right? So maybe at some point in history, it went out of favor when we started to see what the Bnei Ishmael started to do to us. It lost its favor among the Jewish people. That's why I don't see many Ishmael. But actually, it's Yishmael, God. Rav Chaim Vital does say the name Yishmael is actually not so great, because it means that we are going to cry out to Hashem when the Bnei Ishmael start to hurt us right before Mashiach comes and attack us in the land of Israel. And we're going to cry to Hashem, as we're doing every day, and Yishmael. God's going to listen to our tefillot. So not their tefillot, but our tefillot. That's Rav Chaim Vital says that on his commentary to Sefer Tehillim.
So they're going to do Teshuvah and Saturday.
Yeah, it's hard to, but I know. I say this a lot, and I've got it in a bunch of YouTube videos, and the amount of them who, just today, I try not to read the comments. I really rant and read like, are you out of your mind? Right? But there are among them many of them who are silent. I believe, hopefully a majority who are silent, who actually want peace. Right?
So they'll join with helping us.
We're seeing it. We see there is the good in Ishmael. There's a good in Esau as well. There's a good in Ishmael, and they're going to want to see it. Hopefully, God willing, inshallah, they're going to win over the jihadi Islamist Messianic death cult people, because they're causing us a lot of trouble. But there's others that want to see peace with us. Yeah, they are, right? And in history, there was that way. Unfortunately, the Iranians are coming along, and as I said, they are a Messianic jihadi Messianic death cult, and they're causing a lot of trouble for us. But there's many who hate them too.
Yeah.
You think we're having trouble with them. Everyone's talking about the war in the Middle East, the Jews against them. It's not. Believe me. It's Shia and Sunni is way worse than Jews and Arabs right now. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? Fantastic. Have a great night. There's pizza at the back, and Rabbi Bracken will be here in a couple of minutes.